The deadline is tomorrow. Everyone else is panicking. Stress levels are maxing out across the room. And this person? They just came alive. You know someone like this. The one who seems to wake up when the stakes get high. While everyone else is drowning, they're surfing. Today we're breaking down the psychology of people who love pressure. Most people think these are just adrenaline junkies or stress addicts, but psychology reveals something different. Their nervous system has learned to interpret pressure as clarity, not chaos. Here's what's actually happening in their brains. Pressure activates their optimal arousal zone. Think of your nervous system like a guitar string. Too loose? It makes no sound. Too tight? It snaps. People who love pressure have found their perfect tension. The exact point where they vibrate at peak frequency. Most people experience pressure as threat. Their amygdala screams danger. Their body floods with cortisol. They freeze, fight, or flee. But people who love pressure? Their brain interprets those same signals differently. The elevated heart rate isn't panic. It's readiness. The racing thoughts aren't anxiety, they're hyperfocus. It's the same biological response. Completely different interpretation. But here's what nobody tells you. This isn't about being fearless. These people feel the same physiological responses as everyone else. Sweaty palms, rapid heartbeat, mental intensity. The difference? They've learned to label these sensations as I'm ready instead of I'm afraid. And this changes everything. Because your body doesn't know the difference between excitement and fear. Both produce adrenaline, cortisol, heightened alertness. Your conscious interpretation determines whether you thrive or crumble. People who love pressure have essentially hacked their own nervous system's meaning-making process. Psychologists call this challenge response versus threat response. In a threat response, your body prepares for damage control. Blood vessels constrict. Inflammation increases. You're in survival mode, trying not to die. In a challenge response, your body prepares for performance. Blood vessels dilate, energy mobilizes. You're in conquest mode, trying to win. Here's the neuroscience. People who love pressure have trained their prefrontal cortex to override their amygdala's initial alarm. When pressure hits, there's a split-second window where your brain decides, is this dangerous or is this game time? For most people, the amygdala wins. Ancient survival instincts take over. But people who thrive under pressure have strengthened the neural pathway between their prefrontal cortex and their stress response system. They've literally rewired the interpretation circuit. And this didn't happen by accident. This is learned. Watch how they talk about past high-pressure situations. They don't say I survived it. They say I performed well under it. Language reveals neural wiring. And their language consistently frames pressure as an enhancer, not a destroyer. But here's what makes this fascinating. They needed early wins under pressure to establish this pattern. At some point, probably young, they faced high stakes and succeeded. That success created a neural memory. Pressure equals performance. And every subsequent win reinforces the loop. Now here's where it gets deeper. People who love pressure have tied it to their identity. Most people separate who they are from what they do. I'm just a person with a job. But people who love pressure, they fused identity with performance. They don't just perform under pressure. They ARE someone who performs under pressure. This isn't ego. This is self-concept. And self-concept is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. Watch what happens when you remove pressure from their environment. They don't relax, they deflate. Low-stakes situations don't bring them peace. They bring them boredom, restlessness, sometimes even mild depression, because their nervous system has adapted to operate at higher stimulation levels. Normal life feels like running a race car in a school zone. And here's the uncomfortable truth. They might actually need pressure to function optimally. Not because they're broken, but because their dopamine receptors, their attention systems, their entire neurochemical setup has calibrated around high-stakes environments. Remove the pressure, and suddenly they're understimulated, which is why people who love pressure often create it artificially when it doesn't exist naturally. Tight deadlines, ambitious goals, risk-taking behaviors. They're not self-sabotaging, they're self-regulating. So what do they gain that most people don't? People who love pressure have access to a cognitive state that most people only experience in emergencies: complete presence. When pressure hits, their rumination stops. Past regrets evaporate. Future anxieties disappear. There is only now, only this task, only this moment. It's forced mindfulness. And paradoxically, it's often the calmest they feel all week. But there's another upside that's rarely discussed. They make better decisions under time constraints. While most people's decision-making deteriorates under pressure, theirs sharpens. Why? Because pressure eliminates overthinking. It forces intuition. It bypasses the paralysis of infinite options and demands action. In a world where most people are drowning in choice and analysis paralysis, people who love pressure have a built-in mechanism that cuts through noise and forces clarity. The ticking clock isn't their enemy, it's their editor. Here's what society glorifies: work-life balance, stress management, self-care routines, calm productivity. But what actually works for people who love pressure? Intensity cycles. They don't need constant calm, they need high pressure followed by deep recovery. Sprint, rest, sprint. Society tells them to reduce stress and take it easy, but that's like telling a sprinter to jog everywhere. It's not advice, it's a misunderstanding of how their system operates. The problem isn't that they love pressure. The problem is when they forget to build in recovery. But here's the nuance. For some people, loving pressure is power. For others, it's avoidance. If you love pressure because it brings out your best performance, sharpens your focus, and makes you feel alive, that's challenge orientation. That's healthy intensity. If you love pressure because it distracts you from deeper feelings, helps you avoid intimacy, or gives you an excuse not to examine your life, that's different. That's using pressure as a numbing agent. The difference? People who genuinely love pressure also know how to be present without it. They can sit in stillness without crawling out of their skin. They choose pressure, they're not running from its absence. So who are people who love pressure? They're not stress addicts or adrenaline junkies. They're people whose nervous systems have learned to translate pressure into performance. They've rewired the meaning their brain assigns to high-stakes moments. And they've built an identity around showing up when it matters most. If you're someone who comes alive under pressure, you're not broken. You're not creating unnecessary stress. You're just wired for intensity. And in a world full of low-stakes comfort, that might be exactly what certain situations need. Do you love pressure, or does it paralyze you? And for those who thrive under it, what's the highest pressure situation you've ever performed well in? I want to hear your stories, and if you want to understand the psychology of people who stay disciplined when no one's watching, that's coming next. One reframe, one rule, one move. Reframe: pressure isn't stress, it's activation. Your body doesn't know the difference until your brain tells it. Rule: if you love pressure, honor your intensity cycles. Sprint hard, recover fully. Don't try to operate at medium forever. Move. Next time you feel pressure rising, say out loud, "This is my body preparing to perform." Watch how the sensation shifts.